I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. This week on the Poetry of Predicament podcast, we're speaking with climate scientist Wolfgang Knorr. It's been a couple of years since Wolfgang's been on the show, and he's had some very personal experiences with he and his family facing the immense flooding in Greece recently that has really put him over the edge of no longer being reticent about speaking out in a bold way about climate change. So I hope you'll enjoy this bold conversation with Wolfgang Knorr. Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast. And I am your ever-present host, Dean Walker. And it's been a while. I have been putting a lot of attention on other aspects of this body of work in what's called living resilience, which is kind of the stuff behind the podcast and behind the safe circle calls that we do and so on. And I just got a email from a good buddy, Wolfgang Knorr. Wolfgang, it's so good that you reached out and then shared with me the recent article that you had posted in Resilience, and I'm looking at a shorter version that you've sent from what looks like the Brave New Europe newsletter. And it's just great to talk with you again. You and I got to spend a few times in this kind of interview back in the day, about, I want to say 4 years ago, maybe. I don't remember now. Mostly connected through Jem Bendel's Deep Adaptation Network, and we were both advocates of one kind or another, people who would speak in the place of Jem Bendel when it was really a high volume thing. There were lots of requests for his time and speaking all over the world, and you and I were amongst, I don't want to say maybe a dozen, maybe more people who would step up in with particular areas of emphasis. We'd speak about what we could speak intelligently about in the context of deep adaptation. And what I'm not at all surprised that you and I are we just got through talking just a little bit before we turn on the recorder here. And you, of course, have your expertise in the areas of science, and particularly of the interface or intersection of climate science and a number of other current affairs, what's going on in the world. And so it's not just science. It's never been just science when you and I are talking about deep adaptation, what it is we're adapting to, and what are the frames that you look through, that you interpret the world through. And so it's gotten a little bit more personal with this article in my interpretation of what you've sent for me to read and for us to talk about today. And I'm really appreciating that. Every time we've talked, you of course are in your home in Greece. Now you have a new larger property in Greece, and it sounds very exciting. And I'm wondering if you would just give us a little sense of your timeline, how it's been going since perhaps the past few years, and how is it different now? And what had you write this article? Could you give us just a little taste of what inspired you to write this article and what it's about? And what are the changes that you're experiencing that had you want to write it? And by the way, hi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dean. It's really great to reconnect after all those years.
Yeah.
Boy, it feels a long time, actually.
Yeah.
And lots things been happening. So one big thing is that we had this flood catastrophe in Greece, and it actually did change me in some profound way that I haven't fully understood yet. But because basically, I already explained that. I mean, I've been in climate science for 30 years, but in a way, I've been kind of a mock climate scientist because I didn't have any experience with climate impacts. And I know personal experience, and so we had in September, which is actually, by the way, not unusual for Greece to have strong rainfall events in September, but this was a record-breaking one. Basically, we had rainfall in a single event. We had rainfall for 1.5 years. Sort of in 1.5 days, you had 1.5 years. So I think the floodings in New York that happened a bit later were 8 inches, and we had something like 38 inches in 2 events. So there was 1 meter of rain in 2 events. And I was actually in Germany with my 7-year-old daughter, and on my way back, so we were on the phone, and my wife and my son, they were cut off, we heard. So we were stocking up on things in Thessaloniki, in the big city where we landed, and then we were driving, and then it turned out we couldn't get there because the highway was flooded, and large parts of Thessaly, which is the big plain. It's the largest agricultural plain in the kind of classic part of Greece, which is sort of in classic Greece, there was the breadbasket of Greece, where the fertile agricultural land is, and we got just basically cut off. And so I started writing. It became a 4-part series, and so the first one we were waiting there at some friend's place 4 days, and then the second part is I eventually decided, okay, now we go. I mean, somehow we're going to get there. It could have been like a 20-hour drive, which usually takes 2.5 hours. But then that was even stronger impression that basically we weren't going the normal path. I mean, we were basically going over the mountain and then down towards that plain and then to one place, and then had to maneuver sort of certain streets because there were bridges that had been destroyed. So and then at some point we were about maybe 200 meters above the plain and maybe 10-15 kilometers away, and there was already that kind of strange smell there. It wasn't quite clear what it was. And then we drove on and then to one place where life was totally normal. People were sitting out in cafes, but I heard some conversation that were talking about the floods, and we asked her, can we get to the highway? And said, yeah. And then we went to the next place, and there the floods had just resided. So there had been the first floor of the house has been flooded, and people were there getting all their stuff out, and sort of my daughter was pointing out, there's a playground that's been totally underwater, and that. But the worst thing was the stench. I mean, it was that smell. It was the smell from thousands of animal carcasses. And as there were people drowned, maybe 30 or something, but there were thousands of animals, and as much as 3% of the livestock of the entire country vanished.
Yeah.
And then we saw the tractors and trucks and abandoned, from the floods, and cars parked there with the windows smashed, and then there was this intuitive sense, there was some sense of doom, which was kind of slightly informed by that, and slightly informed by having been in climate science for all these decades, and having had this feeling that we're talking, and nothing's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we haven't grasped what is there to do, and that combined sort of, it's like this can't go well. And just come back to what I was saying in the beginning, I've been in, the imposter climate scientist in a way, because I didn't have any real experience with climate impact. But the fact is, we climate scientists, and I was writing in one article actually, we would never put that on the top of our CVs.
Right.
Why? It's very interesting because doctors, if you are medical researchers and if you've got clinical experience, of course you would put that. It's like on top of your CV,
Right.
because you would
Right.
say, okay, do research, but I know what I'm talking about, but not in climate science. We would be afraid that that kind of intuition, which, everybody calls it intuition, every normal person, but people in academia and the kind of expert, they would call it subjectivity.
Subjective, right? Yeah.
And they would, denounce it. And we would be we would not think of that way as scientists, but we would be afraid that people might say we are being subjective, because that's, you got to do your subjective maths science there. And that was one event was really strong, and it changed my writing. I think I did manage to cast away some layer of kind of self-censorship that's been still being myself. Even though I've been, it's been 4 years, we've been trying, through Jim Bandel in the beginning, and then we set up an organization called facultyforfuture.org, where we try to basically bring together academics to speak out and platform academics who already do that. And so there's been lots of other things going on. And internally, we had a lot of discussion about decolonial framing and how important it is to actually acknowledge, how we are sort of out of our, down from our ancestry and our upbringing, that we're actually part of that system that has created this problem. All these kind of things have been going on and on and on, but all that kind of intellectual discussion had no effect almost compared to that event. Mm-hmm. So actually being confronted with the real thing, which was much more profound. And this long text, this sort of vision for the climate movement, this long article, I had written that already before, but I had somehow something kept me from publishing, because there was something I was still hesitating. And after that happened, and then the COP was starting, I thought, this is the moment I'm going to. So I changed the introduction and the ending, and just got it out. And and so what it really is about is, in a way, that kind of thing that happened to me. It's about just seeing what is obvious. And there are certain things that are just obvious. One of the obvious things is that, these oil and gas industry representatives that are going to COP.
Yes.
Of course, they're getting their arsenal of psychological tricks out. They're salespeople, of course. But people don't want to hear it. They want to believe that, the bad guys going to be the good guys in the end, and all is going to be well. Me too. I want to hear that too. And it's just one example. Of course, they're car salesmen. It's or whatever.
Yeah.
They of course they're trained like that. And if they didn't do that, they would be fired. It's just logical. You can't even blame them. That's their job. And we've created this world, and all what we really have to do is detach from that nonsense and just become human again. That's all. It's really easy, and it's also very difficult. Like all the fundamental things that you we need to do in life.
Yeah,
They're both easy and difficult.
yeah,
As a concept, it's dead easy,
yeah.
but to do is difficult.
I find myself in a similar threshold uh, of really shifting from a head orientation to what was for the past few years more of a heart orientation. And then
Mm,
there seems to be a layer beneath that in my experience that I think you're pointing toward, which I would call, for lack of a better word, a soul orientation. It's
mm.
really more of a ground based, deeply grounded in earth, in our relationship with earth, in our relationship with each other, with all of it, all of the mud, all of the light and all of the love and all of the mud and all of the good, bad, and ugly. That's the
Yeah,
that's the mud of the soul. That's where life comes from, kind of like the ultimate compost. And what I'm
yeah,
hearing you point at is like the easy part. Here's an example of what I'm hearing you say with what can be both easy and difficult in the same breath. Is just a couple of weeks ago, there was an announcement, if you will, a public relations announcement that the Guardian carried, Le Monde carried it, and the New York Times, probably others, but that's all I know. And it was basically an announcement from a number of governments and corporations that they had no intention whatsoever of reducing the production of or the use of fossil fuels. And so um, that was the bald faced communication right at the beginning. Excuse me. Then it was followed up by a projection of that they were they were assessing that we would be doubling our consumption of fossil fuels by 2030. So not only not reducing, but doubling production and consumption by 2030. That is easy to see for me of this is insane. All the gloves are coming off and now they're just boldly saying it, screw the activists, screw the Paris Agreement, everything all this BS about the COP meetings for 30 years. Let's just stop the BS and let's just tell you the truth. We have no intention of doing any of this. So you can go ahead and hold your signs and say you're chanting your activist sayings or whatever you want to do. Glue yourself to the the freeway and whatever. But this is what's really going to happen. So for me, there's an easy part of that. That's insane. That's clearly the people in power telling us what they're going to do, no matter what we think or what we want. And that's an easy thing for me to react to find my own truth in, and so on. The hard part is how do we be human beings with any kind of a future, with any kind of a sense of agency, with any kind of sense of what is the fabric of trust that's behind what we call civilization at every level, from the most intimate relationships all the way out to the most large scale relationships. It seems like there's a shredding of trust at every
mm,
level. So that's where it gets difficult. So this is just my interpretation of what you were just
yeah,
saying, that so many pieces of our world can be seen as quite easy to choose, to experience, to discern, to find my truth. It's easy and it's clear.
mm.
And then right next to it on the same plate is the most complex, the deepest, the most excruciating, painful considering of existential core. What is there if there is no trust? What is
Yeah.
there if the people in power have absolutely no intention of healing or mediating or cleaning up or fixing or changing anything about how they do what they do? So is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to convey in this long article, and it's and yeah, that we have built a society that um, works supposedly without trust. I think this is what we're being told, that this whole neoliberal system and all the proponents, from the beginning they said, okay, we cannot build society on trust because it's unreliable. We have to build a society on self-interest. They didn't call it
And
greed.
control, self-interest and control.
And control, exactly. It's actually yeah, that's what's supposed to be self-interest, but in reality is actually quite steered. It's not, there's a lot of state intervention going on, and it's just in interest of a certain type of, yeah. So we have a society that has this kind of, this is built on this ideology that we don't need trust, we just need self-interest. This is just an ideology, and then that added to that is violence.
Yes.
And
Right.
I mean, it's control, but it's really is violence, and the whole, yeah, and the big problem is that this is exactly coming out of the middle of society. Is
Right.
the more mainstream, the more violent in a way. It's sort of, so we're being brainwashed by sort of pointing out of extremism. Every time I read the Guardian talking about extremism, I shudder inside, because it's just a cover up for the extreme. That's exactly what I'm writing about: the extremism of the center,
Yeah.
the radical authoritarianism of the center and the mainstream, and they just point at what they call extremism, and they like to censor. But what they want to do, they censor everybody but themselves. That's the plan.
Yeah.
And they're quite far into that, actually. And
Yeah.
exactly. And it's built. There's no trust.
Yeah.
You express it beautifully. I mean, it really is. It's cataclysmic. I mean, it really is. There is no interest in saving the planet. There's only
Yeah.
interest in making money out of the emergency. So
Yeah.
that's what I call phase 4. We're currently in phase 3, where the sort of all these power holders, and they're trying to make themselves part of the solution. So that's why we've got Al Jaber as COP president. Exactly. It's just, it could have been predicted, and that's also something I write there. Sort of
Yeah.
one of the weak points of that system is quite predictable.
Yeah.
So everybody could have predicted that, actually.
Yeah.
That it's just it's obvious. I mean, what's the best way for them? I mean, just put yourself in the shoes of their kind of communications advisor or strategic president or whatever.
That's right.
Of course.
That's right.
Of course you do that. I mean, first you support denial, but when you understand, okay, we've got 40 degrees in London, it doesn't make sense to denying climate change. It's just a bit too ridiculous.
Right.
So it's the next step. That was for phase 2. Phase 1 is when they actually generally discuss the problem, which they did prior 1980,
Right.
before the neoliberal onslaught. And so what now we're in phase 3. I've got COP is a trade show for fossil fuels.
Yeah.
No, and it is violent. It's just, and they it's really humiliating. They basically they spit in your face, and then they do as if they were interested in saving the planet.
Right.
It's the ultimate humiliation.
Let me pause you, Wolfgang. I love this. There are so many threads here that are core, and you cover them really beautifully in the article that we keep talking about, which of course I'm going to be putting the link to that article in the show notes for this conversation. And I'm wondering how we're doing time wise.
Mm.
We both were thinking, okay, we'll just do a short introduction. We'll just touch in, and we'll see how that goes. To me, there is so much possibility. If you are up for it, if you're available for it, we could make this a multiple chapter conversation over time, if that's something that would work for you. Is this a pause point where we kind of set it up to have later conversations in depth on any one of these threads that we've started? Or do we basically put the link down in the bottom of the show notes here, and have folks check out put the meat on the bones of what you've written that we keep talking about? What would work best for you?
I mean, I agree that, I mean, this conversation has been going on, sort of going in, sort of going in, was working this way somehow, that we were opening up a lot of topics. I agree with that. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a good place to stop for now, and
Okay.
sort of let the question marks like just
Okay.
remain there for a moment, and let it all sink in. This that we are in a world. I mean, the world is possibly different from what we thought
Mm-hmm.
it would be.
Yeah.
It's just, you said, when they all put the cards down, it is, you've got this monster staring at you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot more people should realize that, and not, be seduced by sort of the agency. We've got agency, we can do something. Yeah, we should do something, but we have to see clearly where we stand.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just being instrumentalized.
Yeah. So just to recap from my perspective, again, I just really thank you for sending me this article and making this connection start up again. It's been too long since we've talked, and it's exciting for me to hear somebody who's as articulate as you are, to be able to also self-disclose, to be vulnerable. And you're kind of telling it on yourself. You're saying, look, in academia, we're not supposed to share our personal experience. That's subjective experience. That's actually does damage to somebody's reputation if we share our personal experience. And what I'm hearing you say is no less academically sound, no less committed to good science when you're doing that. But what I'm hoping I'm hearing in beyond you, it seems like we're at a threshold where, given this recent COP, which you mentioned really fully in your article, how absurd it is, the propaganda, the dog and pony show, the ridiculous, uh, bizarre culmination of this COP expression is, and it's really telling us that it needs to be some kind of a shift. You've got the title of the shorter article that you've sent is "Love in the Times of Climate Breakdown." There is a shift to the ultimate subjectivity. We need to find ourselves back at the core of where trust comes from at
Yeah.
every level. And the only agency that I was talking about, and that perhaps we can follow up in later conversations, is the agency of what's going on in my body, what's going on in yours, in our
Mm.
intimate relationships as close as they get, and then our neighborhoods and our communities. That's the only place we're going to have agency, because we just don't have agency at the level of the cops and fossil fuel industries and the government interventions and
Yeah.
so on. There is none. So would you be interested in perhaps, I don't know what your timing is, how you available you are, but maybe we could do another conversation, or maybe even two if you're up for it, in the near
Yeah,
future,
sure.
and just take it to the next level. Would that work for you?
Yeah. Let's. We just need to find some time and
Okay.
pick out one.
All
Maybe
right.
next time we pick out one topic and
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Exactly. We could just choose one topic, and I would invite you to do that.
Mm,
Look for yourself. What kind of floats to the top of what we've talked about? What seems to be most forward for you? What matters most to you?
yeah. Yeah.
I would also invite the folks who are watching this to really contribute in the comments section. What Wolfgang and I have talked about today, what rings your bell? What is most important to you who's watching this? What would you like to see us deepen, and how would you like to contribute to it? Is it the matter of trust? Is it the matter of agency at the most intimate and community levels? What is it? The propaganda? Is it the bald-faced lying and the extraordinarily cynical existential issues that we're confronting now? Which of those are of interest to you? Oh, dear
Mm.
watcher, listener, reader of this podcast. So please put your comments in this episode, and we'll let that inform what threads we might pick up. And Wolfgang, I really look forward to hearing what you'd like to focus on next time. We could do this next round. I would really like to do that in the particular threads that ring your bell in an important way.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for getting back in touch, and for the shifting that you're allowing yourself to do, the deepening that you're allowing yourself to do, and then you're sharing it with us. I really appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
All right.
I look forward to
Yeah.
continuing this.
All right. Thank you for joining us in another episode of the Poetry of Predicament. This podcast is produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance. Living Resilience exists to offer transformative support and resources to the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities around the world. Our sole purpose is to curate and offer coaching, support groups, courses, and events that assist people in expanding their core skills, competencies, and capacities for facing a troubled, predicament-laden, yet still ineffably miraculous world.